Welcome to our public meeting, our public information meeting for the Multimodal Passenger Terminal Project. I am Derek Cameron. I'm with Georgia Department of Transportation. I'm the project manager for the Multimodal Passenger Terminal Project. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for this meeting tonight. GDOT and the master developer will share with you tonight our design alternatives or concepts for the multimodal passenger terminal. We will have representatives after the meeting to answer questions and take comments that you guys may have in regards to our alternatives after the meeting. I do want to reiterate that these are our initial design concepts, and we do want your feedback and your input and your questions. I would like to thank and recognize our partners who were very beneficial in helping us get to the point where we are tonight. Those partners are FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, who's been very instrumental in helping us and guide us throughout the project. They are our lead agency in regards to the environmental document. We also have MARTA, the City of Atlanta, Greta, ARC, and Central Atlanta Progress. With that, I'd like to thank you all again for coming to our meeting tonight, and I'll turn it over to Dennis, who will take it from here.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you.
A quick run over the agenda. We've got a few different folks who are going to talk to you about different pieces. Jim Richardson, who's with FIC, is going to talk to you about the approach, how we're looking at the MMPT and what this project's about. I'm going to come back up a bit, tell you a little bit about the process and how we've been doing input. Then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, and we're going to have a couple of engineers up here, Rob Ross with Kimley Horn and Ed Campbell with Parsons Brinckerhoff. We're going to talk about the rail and bus and surface transportation considerations that really frame the requirements of a multimodal passenger terminal. And then we're going to have the architect, John Schuyler, is going to talk about how those things become reflected in options and alternatives for design. With that, I want to turn it over to Jim Richardson. He's with Forest City, which is part of the development team, FIC. He knows this project probably as well as anybody, and he's going to walk you through a little bit of the approach.
Good evening. I, too, would like to thank you all for coming here. And I'm Jim Richardson with Forest City. I'm a member of the master development team. It's FIC, Forest City, Integral Development, and Cousins Properties. Anyway, we're going to go over a little bit of old ground for those that haven't seen some of this, but this is really our development partners, the Georgia GDOT, Georgia Department of Transportation, Regional Transportation Authority, MARTA, Greta, like I mentioned, Atlanta Regional Commission, City of Atlanta, Central Atlanta Progress, and State of Georgia. And there's a lot of others that we deal with, too. The project organization, the advisory group, is really set up with the GDOT, Greta, MARTA, ARC, and CAP. You have two paths that we're going down on this process, and the MMPT stationary planning on the left-hand side is the development team with the master developers. And then we also have what we call the NEPA process going on, which is the National Environmental Policy Act. And we have an environmental team with HNTB there. The development team for the master developer really consists of all these firms, and you're going to hear from some of them today. Cooper Carey, local firm, Parsons Brinckerhoff, Kimley Horn, DL Piper, Huntley Partners, Red Rock Global. So as you can see, we've actually put together a large team to do this project. What is the multimodal? It's a connection to all forms of transportation. This will connect Hartsfield Airport, all forms of rail. It'll also connect the buses, cars, taxis, bicycles, all the way down to the pedestrians. What is the MMPT? It's a hub for transportation connecting the city. It's one of the most economic development projects in the state of Georgia, and it's a catalyst for redevelopment. You are here on that star where we're located. This is the MMP study area with, you can see the Georgia Dome, Central Olympic Park, 5 Points MARTA Station, Garnett. And the study area is about 120 acres. The station itself, which we call the project area, sits in the middle, about 15 to 20 acres. Again, the red area identifies 119 acres around the project. And this is really about connecting the neighborhoods for the bike, pedestrians, vehicle, transit access to the MMPT. It's really a public-private partnership with GDOT. The one thing I think that is important about this project is that all the master developers really don't have a stake in the game. In other words, we don't have equity into this, so our goal is to really look out for the stakeholders and work with the public and try to come up with the best project that we can. So it's an agreement between us, a government agency, and a private business to actually how to expedite jobs and make them happen quicker. Some of the advantages that come out of this is that the NEPA process, for example, those type of processes can take up to 5 years. And because of the relationship that we've had, we're going to be able to cut that process down to less than 2 years. And so that, timing kills deals, and it's a good thing to move projects along. So we see this project moving along very quickly. In order to start this project and the approach, we actually went out and did a study of all the stations that we could find that related to this project. And we really looked at design, we looked at engineering, operations, governance structures, finance structures, and we looked at the public involvement. How do we deal with the public, the stakeholders, and everybody else? And in order to do that, we made sure we hired what we think is one of the best firms around, Urban Collage. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it back over to Dennis and let Dennis tell you about some of his stuff there.
I want to give a little bit of background. I know some folks have seen this before, some folks have talked about it. I want to talk a little bit about the history, mainly because what we want to communicate is that we're not reinventing a wheel. We are not trying to put something in place in Atlanta that has never happened before, that there is a history of rail, not just freight rail, but also passenger rail in Atlanta. Most folks realize, the nexus of 3 rail lines was the genesis of Atlanta. It's how you got the kind of great colliding street grids. But there are also what a lot of folks don't realize, unless you're a real fan of preservation or old photographs, how many streetcars there were and how much passenger rail was involved as well. That went on for quite some time. We even had large historic terminals that we don't unfortunately have anymore. And this was really a rail city in every sense of the word. Freight, passenger, streetcar. It was connected by transit. It was very well plugged in. But from 1900, a little later on, as the automobile began to come into a little more prominence, our rail heritage from the passenger side started to get whittled away and peeled back. The freight rail obviously remained and flourished, but the passenger, I think, started to disappear. So we're looking at ways to reestablish that. As far as the process goes, Jim already touched on that a little bit. Very condensed schedule and a parallel process. MMPT, we're about the planning. How do we make a terminal work? NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act, is cross-checking us to look at what are the potential impacts of that planning. It's very much accelerated, but as Jim alluded to, if you let these things sit, it has the effect of taking the wheels out from under development. So we really want to make sure that this proceeds and looks at being implemented. As far as public involvement, we've been going on for almost the entirety of 2012 thus far. You can see the array of folks we've talked to. If we haven't talked to you yet and you want to be talked to, let us know. We are very much interested in hearing outreach. We've had a number of stakeholder and focus groups that we're going to reconvene and talk with more. It's very important that we hear comments. We know that this is a project of great public interest, and it needs to have a lot of buy-in and a lot of confidence from the folks that it's going to serve. Related to that, you can see this is only a partial list of all the folks we've talked to. First and foremost, CSX and Norfolk Southern. We know there has to be cooperation, obviously, between passenger and freight as they both go forward, but a lot of different stakeholders from educational, institutional, local businesses, property owners, et cetera. If you're not on there and want to be, let me know. Related to that, what is NEPA? For those who aren't familiar with the National Environmental Policy Act, it's really that cross-checking process. If you ran into Charlotte out in the hall, she's part of the NEPA process. She's sort of making sure that what our impacts are addressed, and she's also making sure that we hear your comments. They're doing a lot of data collection to that end, and that's why she's saying, she keeps giving me these comment cards and saying, please make sure they fill them out. Comments are very much encouraged. We had scoping meetings. Anyone here at any of the NEPA scoping meetings? Can I just see a quick show of hands? So a lot of this stuff may be new relative to the scoping meetings. This is a part of the federally mandated process, and these occurred in April and May. A scoping report will be out shortly, and that basically is a recap of everything that they heard in those public venues. The engagement from that is actually going to get rolled into this. We are building the public process one stage to the next. The results of the scoping meeting, we heard lots of comments in the scoping meetings, but some of the high-level issues, in general, this was positively received. I think most folks are fairly excited about this. A lot of the comment was, we can't wait to see more, we can't wait to see more, which is obviously why we've got a full room this evening. Some potential issues that were discussed or folks wanted to see discussed more are what are some of the limitations potentially of the transportation options in Atlanta? What kind of funding is out there? We have people ask about that a lot. People ask about T-SPLOST a lot, the relationship to it. And frequently, what sort of things are, who wants to be partners with this and how can we work together to make this a reality? And as far as the station itself goes, most folks had this very kind of consistent comment. They wanted it to be iconic. They wanted it to be something big, something visible, something that you could have a postcard of. And they wanted it to be sustainable. And they meant that from a variety of standpoints, whether it's energy efficiency or just something that enhanced the overall transportation network and encouraged transportation sustainability within Atlanta and really throughout the state of Georgia. From all that we've heard and from all the studying we've done and all the existing conditions we've looked at, they're really a series of planning goals that we want to get. Whatever happens out of this, there are certain things that we want to address. And the folks who are going to follow me, the technical folks and the folks who really have the expertise in designing station and rail and surface transportation, are going to talk about these in a little more detail. Rob Ross is going to be first. He's with Kimley Horn. He knows surface transportation very well. He's going to talk a little bit about the buses and the pedestrians and how this all connects, not just within the study area, but beyond the study area. We know there are connections that have to be dealt with into the MMPT study area, not just within it. He's going to talk a little bit about that, talk about enhancing and promoting the bus experience, really creating a great pedestrian environment, and then weaving connections both from the north to the south and from the east to the west so that you don't have this literal gulch anymore. You have a re-knitted fabric within downtown. Ed Campbell of Parsons Brinckerhoff is going to follow him. He's going to talk a little bit more about the technical details of the rail, and he's going to talk about how we plan for future rail, and that's not just passenger, that's also freight, all forms of rail, and talk about what goes into designing a functional station. He's going to be followed by the architect John Schuyler, who's with us, who's going to talk about what these alternatives look like, how they catalyze development opportunities, and how we integrate new public space. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob Ross, who's going to talk with you about surface transportation and access.
Again, Rob Ross with Kimley Horn. We're responsible for the surface transportation around the site and the infrastructure surrounding the project area. One of the first things we wanted to look at for the design of the MMPT is how the buses are going to get to and from the station itself. There are going to be a lot of buses that access this. Gwinnett County Transit, Greta, Cobb County Transit are all significant, have significant bus ridership into downtown, and want to make sure they can get here easily. We see the interstates. Obviously, the interstates are the best access from those places far away, and particularly the HOV lanes. These buses are going to want to have that quick HOV access to downtown. Now, there's a lot of ways to get to downtown from the region. Some of the interchanges are better than others. I'm sure all of y'all have your own opinion on the best way to get downtown. And I think that we've found that during this process. Some of the roads, some of the connections are better, some of the interchanges are better than others, but they don't always match up. So one of the things we wanted to make sure we did was to design a flexible site. A station with multiple access points that can change over time as GDOT comes in and implements managed lanes on I-20 or through the connector. This terminal station itself can change with that. Buses are very important, but also cars are going to be important as well. One of the goals of this is to get more people to ride transit, but not everybody is going to have access to transit. Not everybody can ride it. Not everybody's going to choose to ride it. So so we want to make sure that the cars can get to and from the station as well. There's going to be a significant amount of overbuild. There's development that's going to occur near the station. Jim mentioned earlier the public-private partnership. That development is going to help pay for the station. So we want to make it an attractive development near here as well. So those folks who choose to drive can drive as well. There's a lot of parking that's on this site today. A lot of that parking is going to be impacted. Previous studies have shown that there's an oversupply of parking, so we're probably not going to rebuild every space that's impacted, but we do want to make sure that the people who choose to drive are going to have a place to park. Grid connections. The Gulch, it's a hole right now. It's not an easy place to get around. Improving the east-west connectivity across the site is important. We've introduced 2 new east-west connections, Wall Street and Alabama Street on the north side of the site. And we've also added a new north-south connection. A lot of folks experience the congestion on Spring Street on the south end of the site. That's congested almost every day. With future development, that would get worse. So we're proposing a new north-south connection parallel to Spring Street to relieve that, and also to break up those blocks, because these blocks that are down here are pretty big and make it hard to get around. Pedestrian and bike connectivity. Can't emphasize enough how important pedestrian and bike access is to this. It's transit. When they get off the transit here or get on the transit, they're going to have to walk or get on their bike. That's how they're going to get to their destination. So we want to make sure that it's easy to get around. With the improved grid network, we're going to make all of these streets complete streets. We want to make them all very attractive for pedestrians, very attractive for bikes, but we don't want them congested with cars either. The pedestrian connection is important for the development and important for that TOD, the transit-oriented development. It's also important to make a good connection to 5 Points, that we might not be directly connected with 5 Points. We may have to walk a little bit to get there. So we want to make it a very attractive, short connection for those pedestrians. And then lastly, we want to have good connections with the event space. Phillips Arena, the World Congress Center, the Georgia Dome. We want good pedestrian connectivity there to encourage those folks when they come downtown for an event to use this station, to use the transit, and increase that transit ridership. Next, Ed Campbell's going to speak with Parsons Brinkerhoff. They've got over 100 years of transit experience, a lot of rail and programming.
Okay, Rob talked about access to the MMPT. Let's talk a little bit about the MMPT and the program overall and how to integrate all those different modes that are shown at the bottom of the slide. It's really about the experience of the passenger. And as you come to the MMPT, whether a loved one drops you off at a KISS ride, whether you ride by a streetcar, pick up a ride to the airport, go to one of the development venues that may be integrated into the station, and or grab MARTA, either on a commute and or when you're intercity travel. It's about the functionality of the entire station and integrating that experience such as that the time you depart or debark from one of your transit vehicles, that your interconnection to the other mode of transportation is very efficient and comfortable. So let's talk about the individual components that are within the MMPT. And the first one we're going to talk about is freight rail. State of Georgia views and recognizes the economic benefit of freight rail, consider the investment in the port in Savannah, and also think about our own selves, our clothing, the products we buy, the raw materials that lay the basis for the electricity you see in this building and in our homes. Freight is an important part of economic development. The MMPT station site is located right in the middle of active freight lines. Our project approach, we're providing a clear path for freight through the site to ensure not only efficient movement, long-term efficient movement of freight, but also ensure and respect the growth that is anticipated not only from the population growth of the Southeast, but results in the growth of freight. So freight is segregated from any aspect of the MMPT station, but focused on that long-term efficient delivery and in terms of the anticipated increases. Passenger rail. Now, Georgia has underway several feasibility studies as well as even advancing into some of the environmental reviews of passenger rail. The MMPT has 5 platforms. The site is actually maxed out really with 5 platforms to accommodate those passenger rail services should they occur in the future. The entire focus of the station, it's located generally, as you'll see in the concepts that follow, general location is between the MARTA 5-point station, a major hub to the MARTA network, providing access north-south and east-west. It's important to have a direct connectivity. The MMPT will have a direct connectivity to MARTA, the 5-point station, but also the Georgia Dome station to the west. And finally, when it comes to the airport, when you arrive at the MMPT, you'll have a multiple of options, whether it's by bus, whether it's by MARTA, whether it's by a shuttle, whether it's by its taxi, even maybe potentially passenger rail in the future to access the international and domestic terminals of the airport. The MMPT project is also going to be integrated with the streetcar. Currently, the City of Atlanta is underway with the implementation of a streetcar network. We're coordinating with Atlanta Beltline, who has the responsibility for that implementation. Streetcars are that last mile conditioned connectivity, somewhat like a moving sidewalk, that gets you to your final destination. Whether it be you arriving at the terminal, at the multimodal passenger station, and going to a business, your residence, a hotel, or a restaurant. The MMPT will have platforms, and because of the activity we anticipate in the MMPT, the platforms will accommodate several streetcars at one time with level boarding and curb access. Buses, and boy, do we have lots of buses at the MMPT. Because really, when you look at Atlanta, what we have as our principal mode of transportation, besides the MARTA heavy rail line, is bus. We anticipate the long-term growth of bus requiring roughly 80 bays within the facility. Now, think about that in terms of the number of buses it takes off the local street grid. You're talking about hundreds of buses. Those buses include, that will use the MMPT, include, of course, local MARTA buses, the regional express commuter buses from the various counties and Greta, intercity buses, which are currently growing somewhat explosively, future BRT, bus rapid transit, that will have articulated type vehicle designs, and of course some of the current buses today are double-decker buses that serve intercity. The point here is that the MMPT is poised for growth within the bus network for bus, and I might also mention the charter bus functions also could access and use the facility. Also, key for any station is that ability to drop off quickly a loved one, either via KISS ride, a shuttle to interface with the station to take you to either the central business district and or hotel, and of course taxis. The MMPT station has adequate queuing for all those different local modes of transportation. In addition, car rental will be available within and integrated into the station. Pedestrian bike. Rob talked about access as how important pedestrian flow is to the station. Well, the station concepts when it comes to pedestrian flow ensure that grid that you saw that Rob presented by east-west flow through the station as well as north-south flow through the station. In addition, bicycles will be provided with facilities not only to store bikes, potentially repair bikes, and store bikes, potentially rent bikes, and maybe repair bikes. And the key to all of these modes of transportation serving the MMPT And about that customer experience through the station is the MMPT is an accessible design in meeting ADA requirements, whether it's a mode and or whether it's the station. With this, I'd like to pass it on to what you really want to hear, and that's John Schuyler, who will present the alternatives.
Before we get into the actual details of the design, we'd like to give you a brief tour of some of the qualities that we think constitute a great transportation center, and a very brief tour of the site itself to give you a sense of the context. So we want to talk to you about the great qualities of a transportation center to give you a sense about the tremendous opportunity that this project has. I think by looking at these images, you'll get a sense about the potential here. Transportation centers are big, complex buildings with very demanding technical requirements. But in addition to meeting the technical requirements, we think that the best transportation centers have these qualities in common. They have a very strong civic presence. There's a clarity and a legibility to how they are organized. They contain a great main hall. There's a vibrancy to them, and they're convenient to use. And last but not least, they're forward-thinking. I should point out to you that the qualities that we're talking about today are things that we think are aspirational. We're going to be showing you some very preliminary images, and these qualities are not going to be fully realized in those images that you're going to see today, but we wanted to give you a sense about where we're heading and share with you what we're working on. Civic presence. These buildings are great transportation centers that all contain a very strong sense of civic presence. They have a very important role in their communities, in the fabric of their cities and their region. They become landmarks. It's essential for a successful transportation center to have a very simple, clear organization so that it's very easy to use for both first-time users and repeat users. It makes them safe and accessible. The heart of every great transportation center is a main hall. These are great public spaces. They're rooms that are shared and part of the community. There's a sense of movement to them. There's a sense of activity, a sense of arrival. It's worth noting that some of the older stations were originally focused primarily on transportation themselves, and they could be great rooms, no doubt about it, but they could be a little static. Over time, these spaces have been renovated and they're much more dynamic. I think what the team is doing is we're learning lessons from the great older stations, and we're incorporating that in the dynamism of the new contemporary stations. As I was just mentioning, transportation centers today are not just about transportation. They're also about great activities. They have a lot of retail in them. There's often dining activities. They become destinations in and of themselves. They become an extension of the user's daily life and an extension of the community of which they're placed. The best transportation centers are also forward-thinking. There's an aspirational quality about them. They represent the best of their societies. All transportation centers are sustainable, and in that they support the public use of transportation. They lower our energy consumption. But the best transportation centers today are also high-performance buildings themselves. Through their design and engineering, there's often something heroic about these buildings as they look towards the future. So, coming back to our site itself, and we're back into Atlanta now. So this is an aerial view of our site, and we'll be looking at options that are going to fall in this area right here. Just to help you with orientation, this is the Phillips Arena in the foreground, the CNN Center, MARTA 5 Points, the Sam Nunn Federal Center, the Richard Russell Building. This is Centennial Olympic Park Boulevard. This is Spring Street, Forsyth, and Peachtree would just be to the east of MARTA 5 Points, and that's Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. This is a panorama photo of the site. This is a 180-degree panorama of the gulch from the CNN deck, which is generally in the middle of the site, and we're looking to the south. all the options that we're going to be showing you today are really based on combinations of 3 blocks. It's important to understand how we arrived at those 3 blocks. First, Ed Campbell was talking about the importance of the rail platforms and where they're going to be located. They're generally in this location. It's important for the station itself to be located immediately above those platforms so that there's direct access to it. Rob Ross was talking about the street network and how important it is for it to integrate with both the existing and the proposed street network. There's an optimum size of block that allows for both pedestrian and vehicular connectivity, and that's generally what's setting this overall street grid. One thing that we think is very important is that there be a very close pedestrian connection between the MARTA station and the MMPT. The diagrams on the lower left-hand side of the slide show the footprint of that program in different configurations. This is the entire program on 2 levels, 3 levels, and 4 levels. And those are drawn at the same scale as the site plan. So we'll be looking at various combinations of those blocks to accommodate various combinations of heights and floors of the program. When you take all those criteria together, it really yields these 3 blocks, which are going to form the basis for the 3 options that we're going to be looking at in various combinations. So I just want to touch again on this issue of walking distance because it's so important to understand how this feels to you as you move from MARTA 5 Points to the station itself. For comparison purposes, this is our site, and these are 2 examples that you might be familiar with from the local area. This is the site showing MARTA 5 Points with the red arrow, which represents a 5-minute walk across those 3 blocks. This is the Atlanta Airport Terminal with the red arrow, which is the 5-minute walk, on one of the typical terminals. It's really half of one of the regular terminals at the airport, just to give you a sense of it. This is the Perimeter Mall in Atlanta. Most malls are also about the size, so if you don't know this one, they're all about the same. And generally, what we find is that the distance from the one anchor to the other anchor is about a 5-minute walk. So just to recap the overall program, both Rob and Ed talked about the overall program between the buses and the transportation, but in addition, we're going to be talking about the importance of the potential for development above and adjacent to the terminal itself. So the first concept. Concept A is going to be located on this block. It's a single block scheme, and it is bounded by Wall Street on the north, Alabama on the south, New North-South Street and COP on the west side, and Spring Street on its east side. This is MARTA 5 Point Station, and it's one short block from MARTA 5 Point Station. So the overall concept is that there is a central main hall, and that is flanked by 2 bars that are supporting most of the program. The buses are circulating in and through and around that main hall. There is the opportunity to have pedestrian connection through the building that will connect the activities to the west, Phillips Arena, Georgia World Congress Center, Georgia Dome, through the complex, through this block, to MARTA 5 Point Station and Atlanta Underground. Now, this is a little bit more of a technical drawing. This is a section through the site. So if you look at the drawing on the lower right-hand side, this is a site plan. Imagine you were to cut through the site this way, remove this portion of the site, and look to the north. What you would see is you'd see the Phillips Arena on the left. This is the new North-South Street. This is the main MMPT itself with its main hall. Spring Street, the connecting block, MARTA 5 Point Station. It's important to point out that there are 2 opportunities for connecting between MARTA 5 Points and the MMPT. There's both a pedestrian connection that can be at street level, or there's the opportunity for a direct connection below street level that would be ADA accessible. There's also many opportunities to bring down additional light and air into that connecting concourse. So there's multiple ways to connect that building. A little closer in, this is the main street level and the main hall itself. The passenger rail platforms below street level. These are 3 levels of bus above the street that are wrapping around, looping around the main hall, and structured parking above that. Now, we're going to show you a little digital fly-through of the site just to give you a sense of the orientation and the scale of the project. These are the existing conditions. Again, Phillips Arena. So, existing street network, COP, Centennial Olympic Park Drive, Martin Luther King Jr., and the proposed street grid. This is the new north-south. This is Alabama Extension and Wall Street. And this is the MMPT for Concept A. This is the connecting block and MARTA 5 points in the distance. This is a view from the east, looking over MARTA 5-point station with the connecting block, showing the opportunity for both connection through public open space, through this public and private development, and one can also be connecting below the street level there.
Show the Constitution.
And this would be the Atlanta Journal-Constitution building, which would be renovated as part of that development block. This shows the opportunity for some of the potential overbuild and development, details to be worked out. Now, as we get a little closer, this is the front door to the complex, showing the main hall with the buses circulating inside and over the space. This shows the streetcar on Alabama and continuous retail at street level on both Alabama and Wall Street. Now, this is an artist rendering of the concept at this stage. It's important to point out that this is very preliminary. This is not what the final design will look at, but it's there to assist you with understanding some of the technical issues and understanding the opportunities and constraints. There's much work to be done. There's a lot of discussion still to be had before we finalize the overall design for these projects. Option B. You may recall in option A, we were really looking at this block. In option B, this is a 2-block scheme. It incorporates that block plus the block to the south of Alabama. It is bounded on the west by the new north-south street and on the east by Spring Street. And again, this is MARTA 5 points, and it's 1 short block away. So the overall concept for this scheme is that there is a double main hall that is straddling Alabama and framing an outdoor public space which contains the streetcar in it. The buses will be on 2 levels, and they'll be looping around the outside of the main halls with parking above. In this scheme, Alabama becomes the primary pedestrian connection between the activities on the west side, Phillips Arena, and through the development block and the activities on the east side, MARTA 5-point station, Atlanta Underground, colleges and universities. Again, the section, if you imagine you were cutting through Alabama, you remove this portion of the site and you look to the north, what you would see is the Phillips Arena on the left. This is the new north-south street. This is Alabama that we're cutting through with the MMPT, the main hall, the connecting block, and MARTA 5-point station. And again, with the 2 means of connecting for pedestrians between MARTA 5 points and the MNP, both above street level and below street level. A little closer in again. This is Alabama with the streetcar stop in the middle. This is the main passenger hall behind it. passenger rail below street level, 2 levels of bus above that are looping around behind the 2 main halls, with structured parking above. Again, existing conditions. Martin Luther King, existing COP, proposed street network. This is Alabama coming through, Wall Street coming through, and the new north-south. The MMPT itself on 2 blocks, embracing Alabama Street with an indoor-outdoor space, the main halls connected to that outdoor space, an extension of it. This is the same view from the east, looking from MARTA 5 Points through the connecting block, in this case, orienting a little bit further to the south and connecting back to Alabama. The central space on Alabama with the streetcar running down the middle. And the potential for overbuild above. Now we're going to be coming a little closer, and this is an early sense of what that interior space might become, with the Main Street, Alabama, still coming through, the central platform for the streetcars, and main entrances to the terminal itself with the halls. I'm probably going to repeat this a couple times, but it's important to underscore, again, these are very preliminary images. What's essential here is the fundamental characteristics of the schemes, not the specific details and whether or not it's glass or not glass, roof shapes. Those are really secondary considerations at this time and are very much likely to change as we work on this over the next couple of months. So, option C. Option C is a 2-block scheme. It uses the same block that we had for option A, but extends that 1 block to the east, across Spring Street, and brings you right to the front door of MARTA 5 Points Station. So this is going to have the most direct connection to MARTA 5 Points Station. It's bounded on the north by Wall Street, on the south by Alabama, on the west by the new North-South Street, again, Spring, and then on the east side by Forsyth. The overall concept for this scheme shares some common qualities as Scheme A, in that there is a main hall at the center of this block that is flanked by 2 wings, but that concept is extended to the east, where there is a secondary hall on that block. The buses will be on 1 level above the street, and those buses will be looping around between those 2 blocks. There's a continuity of the scheme from the Phillips Arena straight through to MARTA 5 Points Station. In this case, we're cutting through 2 blocks, removing this portion and looking to the north. The left side, you'll see the Phillips Arena with the new north-south. This is the western portion. This is Spring Street. This is the eastern portion with its secondary main hall. This is Forsyth. Directly across is MARTA 5 Points Station, again, with opportunities for direct street-level connection between the station and MARTA, and MMPT, and below-grade connection directly into the station. A little closer in, the main street level for passengers, the primary hall, the secondary hall, passenger rear platforms below street level, 1 level of bus above street level that's looping around both halls and across both blocks with structured parking above. So, existing conditions, Martin Luther King, COP. This is the proposed street grid with a new north-south, Alabama, Wall Street, the MMPT across 2 blocks with a main hall that continues across into a secondary hall, direct continuity between the 2 blocks for both buses and passengers. View from over MARTA 5 Points with the main entrance into the complex directly across the street, across Forsyth from 5 Points, showing the continuity. There will be multiple access points to each of these stations in addition to their primary entrances. Again, opportunity for potential development above the station. And as we get a little closer, this is the main entrance into the station, its front door, if you will, with the new north-south, street-level retail, the streetcar located on Alabama, the artist rendering. So you've now seen the basic images for all 3 of the options. All of these options share many features in common, but there's a couple of things that we should talk about where they really are different from one another. So, first and foremost, option A is located on a single block. And it has its central main hall. The buses are on 3 levels above street level in this diagram. Option B is on 2 blocks straddling and embracing Alabama and coming down to Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. There is a central hall that is framed by Alabama and embraces the streetcar. The buses for this scheme are on 2 levels. Option C is also on 2 blocks, but moving east-west rather than north-south. This block and this block, providing a continuous connection between the Phillips Arena and the activities to the west and MARTA 5 Point Station. The buses for this option are located on 1 level. A couple other differences that are worth mentioning to assist you with understanding the differences between the schemes. So, where are their front doors? In option A, the front door is on Centennial Olympic Park Drive or the new north-south road. On option B, it'll be located on Alabama itself in this area. And in option C, it is also on the new north-south, facing to the west. Option A is 1 block away, physically, 1 block away from MARTA 5 Point Station. Again, there's opportunities for direct connections below street level and above street level, but the building itself is 1 block away. Option B, likewise, but option C, this is where you're directly across the street from MARTA 5 Point Station. In terms of pedestrian focus, there's 2 options within A on how you can connect for the pedestrians between the east and the west. You can connect mid-block through the complex, or you can use the streets. In option B, the focus there is really much more about Alabama, and it's really supporting the east-west connections. And in option C, similar to A, there is an internal spine, but it's a continuous spine, continuous concourse that'll move from the east to the west. There are main hall differences. In option A, it's really a single, internally focused one, kind of internally oriented main hall. In option B, there are double main hall with an external focus on the street itself. And in option C, you're looking at 2 halls, a primary and a secondary, with a bit more of an internal focus to them. So with that, I've talked a lot about the overall station itself and the basic options. Now, I'm going to hand it back to Jim Richardson, and he's going to talk to you, and Ed Campbell, and they're going to talk to you a little bit more about some of the opportunities and impacts for the station itself and its relationship to the state of Georgia.
One of the important things is once we get this MMPT station and as it's being built, is how do we connect to Georgia? And that's what Ed's going to go through in a minute. But what I'd like to emphasize and talk about for a second is that the importance of freight. Ed talked earlier about how we're going to be able to work with NS, CSX about coordinating freight through the city of Atlanta without disrupting any of their capacities now and in the future. Well, that same circumstance occurs when we get into the state level, that we have to look outside the state too as we connect and use lines, add lines, is we're concerned about the capacity of freight in the future and making sure that we don't disrupt that across the state. Freight's been an important economic driver for the state of Georgia. We need it and we got to respect it. One thing I like to share sometimes we hear is that for every person out here, there's 70 tons moved per year per person for all of your goods and everything you need to survive, your clothes and everything else. And over the next 20 years, there'll be another 30 to 40 million people, and you multiply that out, that's another 2 billion to 3 billion tons of freight that needs to be moved. So the freight line capacity needs to be open. We need to work with them on passenger rail, and I think we're developing those relationships to do that. And with that, I'm going to let Ed talk a little bit about how these are going to connect in the future and how we work to do this.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about and really expand on what I briefly said about the current feasibility and actually environmental NEPA efforts related to passenger rail. Georgia MMPT and its general location in the state. Coming from the current state rail plan, this is actually intercity connection between the Georgia multimodal passenger terminal and the rest of the state. Of note is Macon actually is a hub in this scenario with a focus on the trunk between Macon and Atlanta. Commuter rail plans that have been studied in the past that connect to the various regions around Atlanta up to the south, to the east, and to the northwest. Amtrak services, current operating Amtrak services, and really when you think about this is there are current efforts to enhance little by little those corridors where Amtrak serves, not only through coordinated efforts with the existing freight hosts, but also through station improvements. And finally, high-speed rail out in the future. Georgia has 4 lines that connect to Atlanta. One that comes from the northeast and connects ultimately to Washington. One that goes to the north connecting to eventually Chicago, potentially, but really Chattanooga and Nashville. And one that connects west to Birmingham and, of course, down to Macon and Jacksonville. This study was recently completed. This is a feasibility study that examined the feasibility of high-speed rail in these corridors and considered not only within the freight corridor, but also the interstate corridor and Greenfield. And so it's, when you think about high-speed rail, it's not necessarily in the freight corridor. And so with that, I'll turn it back to Dennis, I believe.
The next steps for us, it's refining the station alternatives and eventually getting to what Jim referred to earlier, which is a preferred alternative, and that's what we would go studying in more detail. We're going to continue. There's going to be at least another one of these meetings, probably several other focus group meetings, more neighborhood meetings. We're going to continue this dialogue for quite some time. The next public meeting, very likely sometime this fall. If you got the notice this time, you'll get it again next time. If you have want more information and you don't get it here, for the record, Derek Cameron, you met him at the beginning of this, was the project manager. You can contact him with this information on the screen. It is also on the comment card that you got at the front desk, if you got one at the front desk, and you can visit the website. The website is updated rather frequently. With that, I would like to thank everyone for coming. I know this is a big thing. You're missing the dinner hour. Thank you again for coming. Good night.